The night was cooler than usual for early autumn. A whisper of wind curled through the branches above Archer Avenue, rustling leaves into a gentle shiver. The road stretched empty in both directions. Two narrow lanes cutting through woods so dense the darkness felt layered. First the trees, then the night itself, then something deeper still. Jack Reynolds wasn't a superstitious man. 32, quiet, practical. He worked long shifts at a warehouse near the edge of the city, usually opting for the night schedule to avoid traffic. His routine was simple: clock in, keep to himself, clock out. Then drive home down Archer Avenue. That Thursday night had been like any other. He'd stayed a bit later to help clean up a spill. Near the loading dock, didn't get in his car until nearly 1:30 a.m. The highway was dead quiet. Not even the usual freight trucks rumbled by. The only light came from his headlights, and the moon a weak sliver, barely strong enough to glint off the edge of his windshield. He didn't mind the dark. In fact, he liked it. There was something peaceful about the world asleep while he was still moving through it. But just past the old curve near Willowbrook Ballroom, what used to be the dance hall, before it shut down, something shifted. He caught a glimpse in the corner of his eye. A figure. A girl, maybe late teens or early 20s, standing by the side of the road. Her white dress looked old-fashioned, the hem brushing just below her knees. She wasn't waving or stepping out, just standing, still as stone, looking straight ahead. Jack slowed down automatically. He didn't even think about it. Something about her struck him as out of place. Not just her clothes, but her presence. There were no cars, no houses nearby, just woods. He glanced at the clock on 48. 2:04 alarm. He pulled over, easing to the shoulder a few yards ahead of where she stood. He looked into the rear-view mirror. She was still there, pale, motionless, like a statue carved into the roadside. Maybe she was lost. Maybe something had happened. Or maybe she needed help. Jack rolled down the passenger window and leaned over. "You okay?" he called out softly. She didn't answer. After a pause, she moved. Smoothly. She stepped toward the car, not rushing, just walking, like she had every intention of getting in. Her footsteps didn't crunch on the gravel. She made no sound. Jack felt a strange tightness in his chest, like his lungs didn't want to draw the next breath. He unlocked the passenger door. She opened it silently, slipped in. The scent of something faint and sweet, maybe roses, maybe old perfume, drifted in with her. She didn't look at him, just folded her hands neatly in her lap and stared ahead through the windshield. Jack cleared his throat, nerves suddenly humming. "Where are you headed?" She tilted her head just slightly. "Home," she said. Her voice was soft, even emotionless. She didn't offer more. Jack gave a small nod. "Where's home?" "Just up ahead," she replied. "Near Resurrection." He blinked. Resurrection Cemetery. He knew the place. Locals told stories about it, mostly teenagers trying to spook each other. Ghost girls, hitchhikers, vanishing passengers. Archer Avenue had been part of that lore for decades. Jack wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. But as he shifted the car into gear and pulled back onto the road, he couldn't shake the sensation creeping over him. Like the temperature had dipped another 10 degrees, and the shadows along the road had grown longer somehow. The girl said nothing else. Her hands remained at still, her face unreadable. Jack snuck a few glances at her. She was pretty in a quiet, distant way. Her hair was curled neatly around her shoulders. Her dress, though spotless, looked like something from another decade, something his grandmother might have worn to a Sunday dance. They drove for a while in silence. Jack noticed something strange in the rearview mirror. Every time he looked at the trees behind them, they seemed darker than the ones ahead, like they swallowed light. When he looked back toward the girl, she was already gazing at him. Calm, no smile, no frown. "Have we met before?" he asked, trying to cut through the tension in his own chest. "No," she said. He nodded again, unsure why he felt like he should apologize. After a few minutes, the iron gates of resurrection came into view. Black and ornate, they marked the entrance to one of the oldest cemeteries in the area. Jack slowed the car. She spoke again. "You can stop here." He glanced at her. "You live near here." Her expression didn't change. "This is far enough." He eased the car to a stop near the curb. The cemetery gates were locked. The grounds beyond them, still enshrouded in mist. No street lights touched the stone markers. Inside, just moonlight and memory. Jack turned to her. "You sure you're okay?" But the seat beside him was empty. The door had never opened. There was no sound, no shift in air. The faint scent of rose lingered, but she was gone. He sat frozen, both hands gripping the wheel. His pulse throbbed in his throat. When he finally dared to speak, his voice cracked in the silence. "What the hell?" The air around the car felt thick, like time had slowed. He looked around, heart pounding. No sign of her. Just the soft rustle of trees. He reached over and touched the passenger seat. It was cold. Colder than the air inside the car. He didn't sleep well when he got home. The next day, he called in sick. And that evening, he went back to Archer Avenue just to make sure it had really happened. The sun was long gone when Jack turned onto Archer Avenue again. His headlights cut twin paths through the quiet road, scattering shadows against the trees like nervous animals. He told himself it was just to satisfy his own logic, to prove to his own mind that what had happened the night before was some kind of misunderstanding, a waking dream brought on by fatigue. But even now, with his hands steady on the wheel and the soft hum of his car grounding him, a part of him was listening for something unnatural in the stillness. The road was the same. The old dance hall on the left, boarded windows reflecting pale moonlight. The same curve in the road. And then, he slowed down without realizing it. The same stretch where he'd first seen her. Nothing. Jack exhaled, almost laughing at himself. Of course, there was no one. What had he expected? Ghosts didn't wait for return visits. Still, he pulled over at the same shoulder and parked. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled, the only sound beside the insects whispering in the distance. He rolled down the window. The night air smelled earthy wet, like fallen leaves and distant rain. He listened. A single owl hooted once, and then fell silent. Jack reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a small flashlight. He stepped out of the car. Gravel crunched beneath his boots as he made his way toward the tree line. He wasn't sure why he was doing it. There was no plan, no direction. Just a pull, soft but persistent. When he reached the edge of the woods, he paused. There, half hidden among the brush, was an old stone bench. Moss clung to its edges. It looked forgotten, like it had belonged to something else, maybe part of a garden or a path that no longer existed. He walked over, brushing away a layer of damp leaves. As he sat down, a chill passed through him. He pulled his jacket tighter. The silence deepened. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that felt loaded, like someone had just stopped talking, and the pause hadn't ended yet. Jack tapped the flashlight against his palm, but didn't turn it on. The darkness felt almost sacred here. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he simply sat, letting the cool air move around him, listening to the rustle of the woods. Then he heard it, a soft sound behind him, not branches breaking, not wind. Footsteps, slow, light, deliberate. He froze. Every instinct told him not to move, not to turn around. The footsteps came closer, crunching softly over the undergrowth. They stopped just behind him. Jack forced himself to breathe. The air around him turned cold enough to sting his nose. Then a voice, low, breathy, and strangely distant, spoke just behind his left ear. "You came back." He turned sharply. The beam of his flashlight pierced the darkness, flickering for a moment before steadying. No one was there. The forest stood still, tall trees unmoving in the night air. No trace of footprints, no movement. Jack stood up slowly, backing away from the bench. His hands trembled, the flashlight beam jittering across trunks and tangled brush. That voice, it had been real, close. He didn't remember getting back to the car. Just the sudden slam of the door, the ignition sparking to life, tires scraping gravel as he sped off. The following nights, he avoided Archer Avenue altogether, took the longer route home, kept his eyes forward and the radio on. But it didn't help. He started seeing things out of the corners of his eyes, reflections in shop windows that didn't match. A white figure in his rear view that vanished when he blinked. Once he woke up in his parked car outside Resurrection Cemetery. He didn't remember driving there. Jack wasn't sleeping much anymore. Shadows moved differently in his apartment. Lights flickered more than they used to. He started reading, digging through newspaper archives, local folklore sites, ghost forums. That's when he found her. Mary Bregovy died in 1934, hit by a car on Archer Avenue after leaving a dance at the old Willowbrook Ballroom. Some said she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery. Others claimed she never made it to burial at all, that her body disappeared before the service. And since then, stories of a pale girl in a white dress asking for rides, then vanishing before reaching the gates. Dozens of accounts. Jack found one written just a year ago by a woman who'd seen the girl standing in the exact same spot. Another by a retired truck driver who swore someone was in his passenger seat for 20 miles, then gone. Jack didn't feel comforted. He felt watched. Every night he felt it more. Something in the mirror. Something sitting in the back seat when he started his car. He stopped driving altogether, started walking places, staying in more, keeping the curtains closed even during the day. But she was still there. Sometimes he saw her standing across the street, not moving, not blinking. And once, just once, he saw her smile. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile that meant she had time. Jack stopped going to work. At first, he called in sick, sore throat, then fever, then migraines. After a week, he stopped answering the phone entirely. Messages piled up. Co-workers texted. His supervisor knocked on his apartment door, once waited, then left when no one answered. Inside, The blinds stayed shut. The air was stale and heavy. Jack moved little, spoke less. He lived in silence now, letting the clock tick away unnoticed. The television remained off. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed too loud. He didn't sleep in his bed anymore. He slept on the couch, head facing the front door. Each night he made sure the lock was fastened and the chain slid tight. Still, the doorknob sometimes clicked quietly around 2 or 3 a.m., as if someone outside was testing it, not turning it hard, just touching it. He began hearing soft footsteps from the hallway, though he lived on the second floor and the building had thick carpet. It wasn't every night, but it was often enough. One night, shortly after midnight, Jack stood at the window and parted the curtain a few inches. Across the street, beneath the dim glow of the broken lamplight, she was there again. Same dress, same posture. She wasn't looking at his window. Not exactly, but she was facing it. Her body, slightly tilted hands, folded in front of her like she was waiting for something to begin. Jack's breath fogged the glass. She didn't move, didn't blink. He closed the curtain, but the image stayed behind his eyes. Pale skin, dark eyes, hair tucked neatly behind one ear. That night, when he finally drifted off, he dreamed of a ballroom filled with old music, the kind that crackled through radios during the Depression era. Couples danced beneath soft golden light, but one woman stood still, alone. She stared at him from the edge of the crowd. Jack woke up drenched in sweat, unsure if he'd actually been asleep at all. By the next morning, he made a decision. If she wanted him to come back, he would. Not to give her a ride, not to speak, but to watch her the way she had watched him. He needed to understand what she was. So that night, Jack left his apartment just after 1 a.m. He walked all the way to Archer Avenue. It took nearly 2 hours. The road was quiet, the woods darker than he remembered. Mist curled low along the edges of the asphalt, rising from the damp ground like smoke. When he reached the stretch just before the cemetery gates, he stopped, waited, and she came. No sound, no preamble. She was just suddenly there, standing beneath the arch of twisted trees. Jack didn't approach. He simply stood, hands in his pockets, heart loud in his ears. The two of them stared at each other for a long time. Then she stepped forward. Her feet didn't quite touch the ground, not really. They moved like they remembered what walking was supposed to look like. Jack stayed frozen. She stopped a few feet away, closer than ever before. Up close, her face was beautiful in a way that made your teeth hurt. Like a photograph, too perfect, too polished, timeless, and unchanging. Her eyes held something bottomless. Not evil, not kind, just endless. She spoke finally. "Why are you here?" Jack's voice cracked when he answered. "I needed to know." She tilted her head slightly. "Know what? What you want from me?" She blinked. "Just once. I wanted to be remembered." Jack felt a chill spread through his arms. "Remembered?" She nodded. "They forgot me. Even the ones who claimed to love me. They moved on, got married, danced with other girls. No one came to visit me anymore." Her voice didn't sound angry or sad. It was simply tired. Jack swallowed. "So, you wait. I wait for someone who sees me." Silence fell again, thick and cold. Then she said, "You stopped." He nodded slowly. "I did." She stepped back. "Most don't." Her form began to blur at the edges, like fog swallowing the outline of a tree. Before she faded completely, she spoke one last time. "Thank you." And then she was gone. No trace, no sound, just the breathless woods and the road ahead. Jack stood there for a long while, The mist curled around his ankles. Something had changed. The night no longer pressed so heavily on his chest, but something lingered behind him like a glance or a whisper or the echo of a memory. He didn't turn around. Not yet. He walked home in silence. The days after felt different, though Jack couldn't say how. Nothing obvious had changed. He still kept the blinds drawn, still took the long route if he had to go out. But the oppressive weight that had wrapped itself around his shoulders like invisible chains dragging behind him felt looser now, and for a while he slept. Not deeply, not soundly, but enough to dream. Sometimes the dreams were of a car coasting quietly down a moonlit road. Sometimes it was a ballroom washed in amber light. Always at the edge of those dreams, she waited, never speaking, just watching. Jack wondered if she would come again. But days passed, then a week, then two. No clicks at the door, no footsteps in the hall, no reflection in the window of someone who shouldn't be there. And Archer Avenue. He didn't return. Not because he was afraid, but because something had settled. Like a cord had been cut, or a circle closed. Until the letter arrived, it had no return address, no stamp. Just his name scrawled across the front, in handwriting so faint it looked like it had been written in dust. Inside was a single photograph, sepia-toned, curled at the corners. It showed a young woman standing on the steps of a grand building, what looked like the old Willowbrook Ballroom, back when it was still alive with music and lanterns. She wore a pale dress cinched at the waist. One gloved hand rested on the iron rail beside her. Her smile was soft, uncertain, and her eyes, they were hers. Jack sat with the photo for a long time, tracing the texture of it with his thumb. There was no note, no explanation. He turned it over. One line was written on the back: "Thank you for seeing me." That night, Jack drove again, not to Archer Avenue, not this time. He drove aimlessly, windows down, air cool against his face. The streets blurred by in a hush of shadow and light. In his rear view, nothing but the soft glow of tail lights and the faint shimmer of stars above. But something told him she was there, not haunting him, no longer needing to. Just riding along, passing through the dark. And in that silence, Jack spoke softly to the night, not expecting an answer. "I remember you." 3 months later, someone else reported her. A man named Leo, in his 40s. Divorced, 2 kids. He'd been driving back from a work trip late at night, not far from Archer. He saw a girl on the side of the road. Said she looked lost. She didn't speak much. Asked to be dropped off near Resurrection Cemetery. He described her in detail. The dress, the silence, the strange sweet scent that lingered in the car. She vanished before they reached the gates. Leo posted about it in a local online forum, asking if anyone else had seen her. Most replies were jokes, a few were trolls, but one comment stood out, posted by a user named jreynolds.88. It read, "She just wants someone to stop, someone to notice, someone to remember. That's all." The post got no replies. It was downvoted, quickly buried beneath sarcasm and memes. But Leo read it twice. Then he sat back in his chair and stared at the dark window behind his desk, because in the corner of the glass, for just a moment, he thought he saw the outline of a girl standing still, watching. No expression, just a presence. And then it was gone. Some say she's still out there, not a ghost exactly. Not a spirit looking for vengeance or closure. Something older, quieter, a memory given form. She walks the same stretch of road, not because she's trapped, but because it's the last place someone truly saw her. And maybe that's all any of us want in the end. To be seen, to be remembered, even for just a moment. Under the flicker of passing headlights, the wind carried whispers along Archer Avenue, soft threads of sound too delicate to name, like breath on glass. Over time, stories became murmurs, murmurs became rumors, and rumors slipped quietly into local legend. Yet every so often, someone new would drive that stretch of road under a pale sliver of moon and see her. Jack kept to himself after that, moved to a smaller apartment farther west, away from the old roads and the weight of their history. He worked nights again, something comforting in the hum of routine. The fluorescent lights, the clink of inventory and pallet jacks. At least under warehouse ceilings, the world stayed sharp and solid. But the quiet moments came anyway. At 3 a.m. during his drive home, when the roads thinned and the stars watched silently above, Jack would sometimes glance at his passenger seat. Empty, of course, but not lifeless. The space felt occupied. Not in a terrifying way, but in the way an old song fills a room, familiar, bittersweet, fading at the edges. He'd never see her again. He knew that now. Whatever she had been seeking, she'd found it. Not in him, maybe, but through him. A witness, not a savior. A thread, not the knot. Still, there were nights he returned to that photograph. He'd had it framed small and simple, and kept it tucked in the corner of a shelf behind his books. He never showed it to anyone. Never spoke of her, not even to the few friends who remained. Some things were meant to be carried alone, but he never forgot. That was the deal, whether spoken or not. That was the cost. Years later, a girl named Lucy College, sophomore, curious, sharp-minded, drove down Archer with her roommate after a night out. The fog rolled in low that evening, weaving between trees like it had business there. Lucy told the story later. Said they saw a girl walking alone in a pale dress right at the bend before the cemetery. Her roommate swore she hadn't seen anything, but Lucy insisted. She remembered the posture, the stillness, and the way her face turned toward the car as they passed. Not startled, just calm. She tried to tell her friends, posted about it, got laughed off a dozen message boards, called it a prank, an illusion, fog playing tricks on the mind. But she knew what she'd seen. Weeks later, she visited Resurrection Cemetery during daylight hours, just to see. The gates were closed, the stone markers stretching deep into silence. She walked along the edge, fingertips trailing the iron bars. At one point, she paused near a tall weeping willow that leaned toward the path like it had secrets to share. Something caught her eye. A small bouquet of dried white roses tied with a thin piece of lace nestled at the base of the tree. No note, no name. She didn't touch it. Just stood there for a long while, unsure why her chest felt tight, and why the wind for just a moment smelled like old perfume. So the story continues. Not every night, not to every traveler, but sometimes when the road is quiet and the moon is low, she steps once more from shadow into headlight. She won't wave, she won't cry, she won't ask for much. Just a ride, just a glance, just a moment. And if you're the one to stop, if you see her, really see her, maybe she'll leave you something behind. Maybe it'll be a dream, maybe it'll be silence, or maybe, just maybe, you'll carry her with you, not in fear but in memory. Because Resurrection Mary doesn't haunt the road out of malice. She haunts it out of longing. And that's what lingers deepest of all. Not screams, not blood, not horror, but the simple aching need to never be forgotten. Story 2. Route 44 Ghost Truck. The driver that wouldn't let me pass. The first time Mason drove Route 44 at night, it was a mistake. Not the kind of mistake that ends in twisted metal or flashing lights. Just a small misjudgment, leaving the conference too late, checking his GPS too little, and deciding to take the back roads rather than wait in traffic on the interstate. He had rented a dull gray sedan from a company that smelled faintly of lemon wipes and regret. The dashboard clock glowed 11:03 p.m. When he pulled onto the stretch between Seekonk and Rehoboth, the trees on either side folding over the road like the jaws of a closing trap, he turned the radio down. Not off. He never drove in silence, but low enough that the music became just noise, something to keep the cabin from feeling too hollow. The first few miles passed easily. The road was familiar enough, just another cracked ribbon winding through wooded nothing. The occasional mailbox, a flicker of a porch light, then nothing again. But then he saw the truck. It was behind him, just barely. A shadow at first, distant, indistinct. Then a glint of chrome, then the unmistakable flare of headlights bouncing far too high off his mirrors. He checked the rear view again. The truck was close. A long-nosed Peterbilt jet, black, its grille huge and glinting like teeth. No company markings, no trailer attached. Just the cab looming. It was too late for deliveries, too rural for that kind of traffic. Mason tapped the brakes, lightly, not enough to slow, just enough to let the driver know he'd seen him. The truck didn't fall back. It drew closer. The beams flooded the sedan, pouring through the back glass and painting everything inside a pale, washed-out gold. Mason squinted, adjusted the mirror. Still, the truck didn't pass. He flicked on his blinker. There wasn't much shoulder, but he eased slightly to the right, rolling along the edge. No change. The truck clung tight to his bumper, not weaving, not honking, just staying there, far too close. A strange heat bloomed in Mason's chest. Not panic, not yet, but the shape of it. He glanced again into the mirror. Still just the massive grille, those high beams flooding in. But he couldn't make out the driver. The windshield looked wrong somehow, dark like something painted over glass. He sped up, just a little. 50 became 60, 65. The road stretched ahead, unbroken, no turns for miles. The truck matched him inch for inch. "Come on," he muttered. His palms had gone slick on the wheel. He scanned the road. No other cars, no open businesses, just trees. The sound changed then. He hadn't noticed the truck's engine before. How could he miss it? But now it roared, like it had always been there, like it was always just behind him, pressing in. Mason's heart thudded in his chest. He flicked his brights, once hoping maybe it would prompt something, an acknowledgement, a warning, anything. Nothing. He was up to 70 now. The road dipped slightly, then rose. At the crest, he saw it, an old gas station sign. Long dead but still standing. He took the chance, veering onto the gravel lot, hard, letting the sedan bump and jolt into the cracked pavement. Dust sprayed behind him as he came to a halt. He jerked around in the seat. The road was empty. No lights, no truck, nothing. He stepped out of the car into the cool night air. Silence greeted him. True silence, the kind that hangs thick and wrong. No engine sounds, no red tail lights. Just crickets, the distant creak of branches. The road shimmered faintly beneath the moon, still and blank. He waited. 1 minute, 2. No one passed. Eventually, he got back into the car. Locked the doors without meaning to. He didn't sleep well that night. But in the morning, the road made less sense. No tire marks. No headlights burned into memory. No proof. Just his word. Just the way his hand shook when he thought about it. The next night, he avoided Route 44. The night after curiosity pulled him back, and the truck returned. Mason didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Not his girlfriend, not his co-workers, not even his father, the one who taught him to drive with both hands firm and always check the rear view twice. It wasn't the kind of thing you brought up in casual conversation. Not when you couldn't explain it. Not when part of you wasn't sure if it had really happened. But the second time wasn't a misunderstanding. It was Thursday night a week later. Same road, same time. He told himself he just wanted to drive, to clear his head. He'd taken Road 6 eastbound, letting the lights of strip malls and old diners blur by until the suburbs gave way to forest and the signs shifted Seekonk, then Rehoboth. Then nothing. The trees swallowed the road again, and then at 11:21 the truck appeared. Same position, far behind at first, then closer, too close. Mason's hands clenched around the steering wheel. His breath caught. The high beams flared, filling the cabin. No horn, no acceleration, just that oppressive presence behind him. Too big, too silent. He pressed the gas harder. The sedan surged forward. 50, 60. The truck followed. Every time he accelerated, it stayed just a breath behind. And now, he could hear it. The engine wasn't just loud, it rattled something deeper. Something inside him. It growled through the road into his bones. Mason tried again to move aside, angling toward the shoulder. But there was no reaction from the truck. It didn't try to pass. It didn't fall back. It only stayed. It felt like being hunted. Mason's pulse pounded in his ears. He gripped the wheel knuckles pale, trying to think through the noise. He scanned the road ahead. Then he saw it. A gravel path veering sharply to the right. No signs. Just a shadowed lane winding into woods. He made a snap decision. He turned hard. The tires screamed. Gravel spat up in bursts. The car veered off the main road and plunged into darkness. The truck didn't follow. It didn't need to, because as the sedan bounced along the uneven path, Mason glanced into the rear view, and the truck was already there. No engine, no sound, no headlights. Just the black shape of the cab filling the back window. Closer than it could possibly be. Closer than it had room to be. Mason's breath hitched. He slammed the brakes. The car skidded sideways, dirt and rock grinding beneath the tires. It came to a halt with a shudder. He twisted in his seat, searching the rear windshield. Empty. No truck, no lights. Only the hush of trees pressing in on all sides. He got out, stumbled onto the path, looked both directions. The gravel was untouched, no tire marks, no proof. The silence here was heavier, not peaceful, not natural, just still like a breath being held. Mason stood there a long while, listening for any sound, engine noise, shifting gears, the squeal of brakes. Nothing came. Eventually he drove home. He didn't look in the mirror. The next day, he sat at his desk for nearly an hour before typing the words into the search bar. Route 44 truck legend, dozens of results, forum posts, local articles, urban legends, stories dating back decades. Most were almost identical. A man driving late at night alone. A black truck appearing behind them. matching every move, never passing, never backing off. In some versions, the driver sees no face. In others, he sees something worse. One post from 2009 stood out. A woman named Kerry. She described the exact same truck, black cab, no trailer, no logos, headlights, too bright. She'd pulled over near an old cemetery outside Rehoboth. The truck never passed her, but when she looked at her car later, the back bumper was scratched. Deep gouges, like something had gripped it. She never drove that route again. Mason leaned back in his chair, skin prickling. He wasn't imagining it, but the truth didn't feel like comfort. It felt like invitation. That night, Mason took a different route home. All highway, full lights, plenty of cars. But when he pulled into his apartment garage and stepped out of the car, he noticed something strange. The back of the sedan, deep marks on the trunk, 4 long scratches, like talons. No paint transfer, no collision report. Just 4 lines etched deep into the metal. He stood there staring, the cold concrete rising into his legs. The truck hadn't followed him, but it had still come. Mason didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, at least not the kind he could name. It was a different sort of unrest. Like a low-frequency sound buzzing beneath his skin, always just out of reach. He lay on the couch, fully dressed, TV glowing softly, but unwatched. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant hiss of tires on wet pavement. His mind kept looping back to the scratches. 4 deep curved lines across the trunk like claws. He'd run his fingers over them earlier. They weren't random. They'd sunk through the paint into bare metal. No rust. No dirt. Fresh. Whatever had left them wanted to be noticed. At 3:11 a.m. his phone buzzed. No caller ID. Just a single notification. Unknown number. You saw it, didn't you? Mason sat up, heart thudding. He didn't reply. Just stared at the screen until it dimmed. The message vanished a few minutes later. No trace. When he checked his call log, there was nothing. No record. He stood slowly and crossed to the window, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. The street outside was empty. Wet asphalt shimmered in the yellow wash of the street lamp. But he knew it was there, not watching from the shadows, not waiting in the woods. It didn't need to hide anymore. The next morning, he found a scrap of old newspaper shoved beneath his windshield wiper. It looked like it had been torn from a microfilm printout, black and white, grainy. He unfolded it on his kitchen table. The headline read, "Truck driver found dead in cab after fatal Route 44 collision." The article was dated October 12, 1972. It detailed a single vehicle crash just outside Rehoboth. A long-haul driver named Clyde Merrin lost control of his rig near the bend past Mason Street. Witnesses claimed the truck was swerving violently before it barreled into a ditch. The driver was found crushed, unrecognizable. The police suspected a heart attack or mechanical failure, but the article noted something odd. There were deep gouges in the interior of the cab, it read. Scratches that did not match the wreckage pattern, as if something had clawed its way toward the door from inside. Mason stared at the words. The article had no author, no byline. He turned it over. On the back, written in shaky pen, were 4 words. "It follows the living." By now, Route 44 had taken up permanent residence in his thoughts. He found himself studying aerial maps of the road, noting curves and markers, looking for patterns. He built a timeline of sightings reports, first-hand accounts, anonymous posts. They clustered, Every few years, always in the fall, always at night, always male drivers, always alone. The truck never harmed anyone directly, but nearly every driver who encountered it reported something afterwards: strange dreams, electrical disturbances, vanishing time, or something worse. In rare cases, they vanished entirely. A 1997 report of a man who crashed near Palmer River. His car was found idling by the guardrail. Door open, engine warm. No sign of the driver. Mason remembered the scratches. He remembered the engine roar that wasn't mechanical, but guttural, predatory. He needed to know. So the next night he returned. He didn't bother pretending anymore. He didn't make excuses about traffic or curiosity. He drove east toward Rehoboth with purpose windows, closed hands still. At exactly 11:19 p.m., the truck appeared. No headlights this time, just the shape, an absence of light behind him. It didn't creep closer. It was just there, instantly. He didn't speed up. He kept at 55 eyes forward. Every mile stretched longer than it should have, like the road was lengthening to hold them both. Then something new happened. The radio flickered, static, then voices, layered atop each other, whispering things he couldn't understand. A woman's laugh, the thud of something heavy, screeching metal. He turned the dial. Nothing changed. Then the engine stuttered. The speedometer flicked down, then up again. The wheel felt heavier, like something was pressing on it. The truck's presence behind him grew dense like pressure on his spine. Mason gripped the wheel tighter. Out of the corner of his eye, the rearview mirror started to tremble. And then for the first time he saw a face. Not the driver's, something else. A pale skeletal face behind the glass. Grinning, strong, as if it had never belonged to a living thing. Just as quickly it was gone. The mirror cracked clean down the center. Mason pulled over. Not out of fear, but because the car no longer obeyed him. The wheel stopped responding. The brakes softened. He rolled to a stop in front of a row of dead trees. The truck did not pass. It did not appear in front of him, but the air was full of something heavy, something waiting. He sat in the stillness and waited too. Mason sat there for what felt like hours. Engine ticking quietly. Hazard lights blinking a slow dying rhythm against the trees. But no cars came. No other headlights. Just the dark and the weight of something pressing in around him. Like the forest had drawn closer without moving. His hands trembled still on the wheel, even though the car had stopped humming long ago. The silence outside was total, so deep. It felt wrong, like sound itself had been swallowed. Then a new sound. Not mechanical, not natural. It came from behind him, outside the car. Slow scraping footsteps on asphalt. He didn't turn. He didn't want to see it again. The mirror was still cracked, splitting the world behind him in two jagged halves. But he could feel it. Closer now, walking up the driver's side. The door handle twitched, just once, then again. A soft rattle like fingers made of rust and bone, trying to remember how to open something. Mason shut his eyes. The third time it tugged sharply, but the door held. Then it was gone. Just gone. The pressure lifted. The air felt thinner, lighter. The forest exhaled. Mason opened his eyes. He turned the key. The car started. He drove. This time the road felt shorter. Or maybe he simply didn't notice the miles. Back in his apartment, he locked the door behind him, pulled the curtains shut, sat on the edge of the couch, and stared at his hands until the first gray light of dawn crept through the fabric. Then he reached for his laptop, typed into a blank document, October 14th and 1:06 a.m. It tried to open the door. He stared at the sentence, then saved the file with no name and closed it. The next few nights were quiet. No strange dreams, no phantom headlights. The scratches remained, but didn't grow. The cracked mirror stayed broken. It felt like a ceasefire, like whatever haunted Road 44 had taken his measure and stepped back. He didn't return to the road. Not right away, but he kept reading. The older stories fascinated him most. Drivers from the 60s, 70s who told their tales in low voices at diners or on ham radio channels. One story stood out. A man named Harold, now in his 80s, claimed he saw the truck once, only once, when he was 25. Said it had followed him all the way to Providence before vanishing beneath a bridge. But it didn't stop there. Over the years, Harold started seeing it in other places. Reflected in windows, on empty roads. Once he swore he saw it in the sky during a storm, its black shape riding between lightning flashes. "I think it attaches to you," Harold had said in a podcast interview from 2006. "Not like a spirit, more like a story that wants to keep being told. So it uses you to carry it forward." Mason played that clip over and over. A story that wants to keep being told. On the 6th night after the last encounter, Mason went to the gas station down the block. Just after midnight, the lot was mostly empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed above him like dying flies. He stood outside his car, letting the pump click, and then he saw it, not the truck, a man, across the lot, leaning against the side of the building. Tall, thin, face half lit. He wore an old mechanic's jumpsuit, oil-stained and torn at the collar. But it was the eyes that stopped Mason cold. Wide, bright, wrong. They weren't looking at him. They were looking through him. The man didn't speak. He just nodded once, slow, as if to say, "You're part of it now." Then turned and walked behind the building. Mason followed, but the alley was empty. No door, no footsteps, no man, just the smell of oil and burnt rubber. That night, Mason dreamed of the truck again. But this time he was inside it, seated high in the cab, hands on the wheel. The road stretched endlessly ahead. No lines, no signs, just dark. He couldn't stop. He wasn't allowed to. And in the mirror, a dozen headlights. Cars behind him, each one with a driver just like him. Eyes wide, mouths open in silence. All following, all trapped, all part of it. He woke up gasping, heart beating, like something trying to escape his chest. Morning came pale and uneasy. Mason sat by the window with a cold cup of coffee, watching the street breathe back to life. Cars passing, joggers with headphones, dogs tugging leashes. The normalcy of it pressed against his skin like a costume he didn't know how to wear anymore. He hadn't left his apartment in 2 days. Not since the dream. That dream hadn't felt like a dream. It had felt like a warning, or a memory, or both. The truck hadn't returned. Not physically, but it was everywhere now. In the corners of windows, in the sudden flickers of static on his TV, in the sound his bathroom mirror made when it shifted slightly like glass trying to remember a face, and in the silence that now accompanied him like a shadow. One afternoon he opened his laptop again, typed 4 words. "What does it want?" Then sat there, cursor blinking. No answer came. But a few hours later, a package arrived. No return address, no label. Inside was a cassette tape, old worn, the kind with handwritten stickers on the sides. In red ink, smeared "Play Me, Route 44. Mason didn't own a cassette player, but the local pawn shop 3 blocks away did. He walked there in the drizzle. The man behind the counter barely looked up when Mason explained. Just sold him a dusty unit for $20 and told him it still worked on its better days. Back home, Mason plugged it into the wall, slid the tape in, It clicked word and began. At first, just the sound of tires on asphalt. Wind, then a low hum, mechanical, heavy, then voices, layered, whispering over one another. Too many to separate. One pushed through. A man's voice, old and shaking. We thought it was just a road, just pavement and turns. But it's not. It's something else. It remembers you. Another voice. A woman this time whispering. It's not chasing, it's choosing. Then static, and faintly, a horn. One long blast, distant, getting closer. Mason ejected the tape. He didn't play it again. Didn't need to. That night he packed a bag. Not much, just enough to last a few days. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Didn't leave a note. He got in the car and drove, not away, toward it. Route 44 opened before him. Like a mouth, its black top slick and waiting. He drove past the gas station, past the gravel turnoff, past every point where he'd once tried to escape, until the truck returned. No headlights, no horn, just the presence. Behind him, heavy, timeless. This time he didn't run, didn't pull over, didn't panic. He kept driving, and as he did, the world fell away. The trees blurred into shadows. The stars disappeared. It was just road, endless dark road, and Mason behind the wheel, following a rhythm older than asphalt, older than steel. Because the stories don't end. They change drivers. They pass through hands. They wait for the next person to take the turn too late, to ignore the signs, to look too long into the mirror. And when they do, the truck finds them, not to hurt, not to kill, just to remind that some roads don't lead anywhere. They just follow. Story 2. The Man in the Ditch. Highway 93 apparition. The first time William saw the man in the ditch, it was just after midnight. He had been driving southbound along Highway 93, a straight shot of nothing through high desert. His SUV hummed along the faded asphalt headlights, sweeping over sagebrush and broken fences. There was no cell service out there, no gas stations for nearly 60 miles. Just a long, empty hush between towns. He liked it that way. William was used to solitude. After years of warehouse shifts and forgettable apartment walls, he found comfort in wide open spaces. Landscapes so quiet they swallowed you whole. He'd taken a week off, loaded the car with camping gear, and decided to drive out toward Arizona. Nowhere in particular, just following the road and whatever music the satellite radio offered. That night the road was empty. The moon was out, 3/4 full and low enough to skim the mountaintops in the distance. Its light brushed the road in soft silver and cast long shadows where the land dipped beside the highway. That's when he saw him, a shape, just off the shoulder, maybe 30 yards ahead. William eased off the gas. There, lying on his side in the ditch facing the road, was a man. No movement, no reaction to the headlights. He was dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. Pale face, one arm stretched out across the dirt like he had reached for something before falling asleep. William slowed to a crawl, rolled to a stop just beyond him, and put the hazard lights on. He sat for a second, blinking against the dashboard glow. His breath came slower, heavier. There was no car nearby, no tire tracks, no sign of an accident. He checked his mirrors. Still no traffic. Cautiously, he unbuckled and stepped out. The desert air was sharp and dry, carrying with it that endless nighttime hush, so complete it made the crunch of gravel under his boots feel too loud. He walked back toward the man, flashlight in hand, the beam shaky but steady. "Hey," he called gently about 10 feet away. "You all right?" No response. The man didn't move. William crouched at the edge of the ditch, shined the light toward the body. Still no movement. And then he saw the eyes. They were open, wide, staring, but not at him, past him. Past everything, the pupils were too large, swallowing the irises. His skin looked dry, dust-covered, like he had been lying there for hours. But something felt off. William reached slowly for his phone. No signal. He looked back at the road, still empty. Then he turned back, and the man was gone. Not shifted, not rolled. Gone. Only the outline remained faint in the dirt. No wind, no sound. William staggered back, heart suddenly hammering in his chest. He swept the flashlight in every direction. Nothing but brush and rocks and the moonlight slicing shadows across the earth. He ran to the SUV, slammed the door, locked it and drove. Didn't stop for an hour, didn't speak out loud, didn't even blink too long. Just drove until the desert finally gave way to the edge of a blinking gas station light miles down the road. He stopped, got out, stood under the fluorescent buzz of the pump island and stared at his hands. They were still shaking. He hadn't imagined it. He knew what he'd seen and what he hadn't. He asked the cashier if anyone else had stopped in with car trouble. Anyone walking, maybe hitching south. The guy just shrugged. You're the only one I've seen in hours. William drove again the next day, and the day after that. But he never took his eyes off the ditches, and he never stopped wondering why the man had been looking not at him, but through him. 2 nights later, William found himself back on Highway 93. He hadn't meant to be. The plan had been to circle east, swing down toward Kingman, then west toward the Mojave. But somewhere, just outside Caliente, he missed a turn, though he didn't remember missing anything. When he looked up from the gas gauge, the road sign simply read, South 93. He should have turned around. Instead, he drove. The sky was darker this time, clouded, the moon hidden behind a heavy curtain of gray. The only light came from the high beams carving out a narrow slice of road ahead and the soft red glow of his dashboard. He kept telling himself it was fine. Just road, just night. But he knew better. That stretch, those same faded reflectors, the broken guardrail near mile marker 227, it was the same place. The place where the man had been. He drove slower now, watching the ditches. Nothing, just dark rock and scattered brush. But his hands were tight on the wheel, every muscle waiting, preparing. The GPS flickered once, then again. Then it went black. The music cut off, and the headlights dimmed, just for a moment, but it was enough. In that heartbeat of near darkness, he saw him again, standing this time on the shoulder, one arm dangling loosely at his side, the other bent fingers twitching against his thigh. Head tilted like a broken mannequin. Then the lights returned, and he was gone. William swerved. Tires screeched against the shoulder. The SUV fishtailed gravel, spraying before he caught control and came to a shaky stop. He sat there, heart hammering, breath short. No sign of movement, but something lingered. A smell, dry earth, and something else, something coppery, metallic, like rust and blood baked into desert stone. William reached for the glove box, pulled out an old road map, unfolded it shakily. He found his position, mile marker 227. The same. He circled it in pen and drove again. That night, he found a motel in Ely, the kind with flickering signs and carpet that smelled like old cigarettes and time. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the floor map, spread out before him, cross-referencing sightings, road curves, elevation changes. Online forums were full of noise, but some threads repeated the same name. The man in the ditch. Folklore, local myth, but too consistent, too detailed. Some said he was the ghost of a drifter, hit in the 70s and never identified. Others claimed he wasn't a ghost at all, just something that took the shape of a man. Something older than the road that watched those who drove alone and tired and curious. Always the same details. A man laying or standing on the edge of the road, eyes wide, face blank, appearing in the blink between thoughts, and then gone. William marked every mention on his map. A pattern started to form. All sightings within 30 miles of mile marker 237. A dead zone, like a bruise spreading beneath asphalt. And in every story, no one ever saw him twice, except William. At sunrise, he returned to the stretch, parked the SUV, sat on the hood. The air was still. The desert glowed gold and pale pink. He walked down into the ditch. It was shallower than it looked from the road. Soft sand flecked with broken glass, dry weeds, and the husks of long dead beetles. He stood where the man had been lying, closed his eyes, listened. Nothing. No wind, no birds, no cars, just the sun crawling slowly across the hills. He crouched, pressed a palm into the dirt, and found something, a faint depression, the shape of a body, no footprints, just the impression chest-shoulder, the curve of a face in dust. Too detailed to be from wind, too fresh to be old. He stood quickly, brushing off his hands, turned back toward the road. The SUV was still there, but someone was sitting in the driver's seat. A figure, still, head bowed. William blinked. It was him, himself, sitting perfectly still behind the wheel, expressionless, waiting. And when the figure turned slowly to look out the window, the eyes were wide, empty, black. William stumbled backward, heart thudding. And when he looked again, the SUV was empty, just sun glare and silence. He didn't approach the car right away. Something in him resisted, pulled back, like a tide retreating from shore. His legs felt rooted to the dry soil of the ditch, lungs struggling to remember how to breathe. The image of his own face behind the wheel hadn't been a flash, a hallucination. He'd seen it too clearly. Same jawline, same shirt, same scar above the eyebrow. But the eyes, those hadn't been his. Eventually, he climbed back to the road, one slow step at a time. The SUV sat still, an ordinary dust clinging to its flanks. Windows tinted just enough to blur the interior. He stepped closer. The seat was empty. No sign of anyone. The keys were still in the ignition, untouched. The engine quiet. Everything just as he'd left it. But his reflection in the driver's side window didn't match his movements. When he tilted his head slightly, it stayed still for half a second too long, just long enough to notice. He got in, hands trembling, closed the door, locked it. Then he sat there, unmoving, staring at the road. A thin layer of grit coated the dashboard. The scent of the desert hung in the air, hot, plastic, sun-baked metal, and something else. Something like dust after rain. It was then he noticed the smudge on the inside of the windshield. Just above the passenger seat, smeared across the glass, were the faint impressions of fingers. 4 streaks trailing downward. Not from him. Not from anyone he knew. The glass was cold to the touch, colder than it should have been. He wiped it clean and started the car. He drove south, faster than he should have. Past the markers, past the ditches. By the time the sun was high, he reached Pioche. Pulled into a small diner with warped wooden siding and peeling green trim. He ate without tasting. Then he asked the waitress, "Have you ever heard of anyone seeing someone on the side of 93? A man in the ditch?" She didn't answer at first, just poured his coffee, eyes downcast. Then quietly, "Lots of people don't talk about that stretch. Too many stories." He waited. She hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. "My cousin swerved to miss a man once. Flipped her car in the wash. No one ever found the guy. Cops said she must have fallen asleep. But she didn't," he asked. She shook her head slowly. "She still won't drive at night. Says his eyes looked like they weren't meant for this world." William stared into his cup. His stomach turned. When he returned to the SUV, there was a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Not paper, cardboard torn from the side of a cereal box. Written in red marker, "You should not have looked back." He checked the lot. Only one other car. Belonged to a man in his 60s who hadn't moved from his booth the entire time. When William tried to approach him, the man stood and walked out the back exit without a word. The note remained in William's hand. He threw it in the trash, but the words etched themselves into the back of his mind like dried blood. That night he didn't sleep in a motel. He drove again, compelled by something nameless, not fear, not obsession. Something quieter, something like gravity. At 12:42 a.m., he passed mile marker 227 again. He didn't stop, but the SUV slowed on its own. The engine didn't stutter. The wheel didn't lock. It just felt heavy, resistant, like the road wanted him to stay. And then there he was, the man in the ditch, but not lying down, standing in the middle of the road, facing him, eyes wide, arms limp at his sides. William slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded. Tires screamed. Dust swirled around him like fog. The vehicle came to a stop just feet away, but the road ahead was empty. The man was gone. Not even footprints. William sat frozen sweat cold on the back of his neck. Then he felt it, a presence, inside the car, breathing slow and deliberate. Not his. From the back seat. He didn't turn. He stared straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel. The breath grew louder. Inhale, exhale, like someone sitting inches behind him. Then, a hand touched his shoulder. Cold, dry, fingers too long. He turned, and there was no one. Just the empty seat. But the cold lingered, and the outline of a handprint remained on his shoulder, as though pressed through fabric and skin alike. He didn't remember driving away. The miles passed like sleep-broken pieces of light and shadow strung together by muscle memory. By the time he realized he was moving, he was nearly 50 miles south, the highway unspooling endlessly ahead. The desert around him dead silent, except for the rumble beneath his tires. He pulled into a rest stop just outside Alamo. It was one of those isolated pull-offs. 2 rusted picnic tables, a cracked vending machine, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't seen a mop in years. He killed the engine and sat in the silence, letting the weight settle. There was still a chill clinging to him, even though the night was warm. It clung behind his neck in the folds of his shirt, in the shallow space between his shoulder blades. He stepped out into the darkness. The stars were clearer. Here, millions of them spread like frost across the sky. But they brought no comfort. Not tonight. He walked to the edge of the lot, looking out across the scrub brush and dirt that stretched forever into the dark. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. He should have felt alone, but he didn't. That was the worst part. He stood there until his limbs started to ache, then returned to the SUV. There was dirt on the windshield. From the inside, smudges. Like something had pressed a forehead and 2 hands to the glass from the passenger seat, then dragged them downwards slowly. William wiped it with his sleeve. The dirt came away easily. Too easily. There had been no wind, no dust storm, no explanation. He got in and closed the door, with care like he was afraid to startle something. Then from the glove box, he pulled out a small notebook. He flipped past notes about gas mileage, campground addresses, food lists, and started a new page. He's not just in the ditch. He's in the car now. He stared at the sentence until the ink dried, then added slowly, "I think he's learning." The dreams began that night, fevered, shifting things that left him sweaty and breathless. Waking in the back seat with the windows fogged over and a vague sense that someone had been watching him just before he opened his eyes. In the dreams, he was walking along the side of the highway barefoot, the road warm underfoot, the sky huge and starless. And always ahead, Just out of reach was the man, not running, not hiding, just walking, letting William follow, letting him try. Each time William got closer, the figure would dissolve like mist, and he'd wake. One night in desperation, he stopped at a bar just outside Caliente. The place was nearly empty, a glowing jukebox in the corner playing music 2 decades out of date. He ordered a whiskey and sat at the far end. An older man sat nearby nursing a glass of something clear. Eventually their eyes met, and the man said, "You've seen him, haven't you?" William didn't answer. He didn't have to. The man nodded slowly. "I saw him in '93, he said, outside Pioche, just laying there, looked dead, skin like stone. He took a drink. When I blinked, he was gone. For a long time, I thought it was just stress. Then a year later, I started seeing him in my dreams, standing in the hallway, by the road, in the mirror." William's throat felt dry. "Did it stop?" he asked. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. William left without finishing his drink. He didn't drive that night. He parked in a lit area, leaned his seat back, and stared at the ceiling of the car. He didn't sleep. But just before dawn, he saw the man again, standing in the gas station lot, still watching, backlit by the low floodlights, face hidden in shadow. No features, just the outline, just the silence. And when a truck passed and its headlights swept the lot, he was gone again, as if he'd never been there. But William knew better. He always left just enough, a shoe print, a smudge, a chill that didn't leave the air even as the sun rose. He always left something behind. The final straw came a week later. William checked into a cheap roadside inn after 2 days of trying to outrun him, changing directions, driving by day, sleeping with lights on. He locked the door, bolted the windows, left the TV on static just to fill the room with sound. But in the middle of the night, the screen went black. The lights cut out, and in the flicker of the bathroom mirror, William saw 2 reflections, his own and the man's standing just behind him, closer than breath. He didn't turn around, couldn't. Every muscle in William's body locked into place, frozen in that narrow space between instinct and disbelief. He watched the mirror, watched the shadow behind him stand motionless just inches away. It had no face, not truly, just the vague outline of features, as if someone had drawn a face in charcoal and then smeared it with their thumb. But the eyes, those were sharp, too sharp, open too wide, empty and endless. They stared into the mirror, and William felt something slide behind his ribs. Something ancient, something hungry. Then the light snapped back on. The mirror was empty. His own reflection blinked back at him. Pale and wide-eyed sweat slicked across his brow. The bathroom was silent. The shadow was gone. But on the fogged glass, a handprint remained, pressed from the inside. He left the motel before dawn, didn't pay, didn't grab his things, just drove south, then west, then north again. Anything to stay moving. But no matter where he went, the man came too, not always visible, sometimes just a flicker, a shape in a window across the street, a form standing still at the edge of a gas station lot, a reflection in chrome that shouldn't have been there. He tried telling people. No one believed him, even those who claimed to believe in ghosts. None of them had seen this. This wasn't a haunting. It was a claiming. William stopped keeping track of time. He didn't remember what month it was, didn't know what town he was in, only the road, only the miles, only the night. He rarely slept, and when he did, he woke up choking on dreams of being trapped in the ditch, unable to move, looking up at the sky, unable to scream, while something leaned over him, looking down, eyes wide. And then one night he understood. He wasn't running from something. He was becoming it. It began small, He stopped seeing the man as often. The reflections faded, but he began to catch people looking at him strangely, in rest stops, in diners. A woman passed him in a motel hallway and recoiled, as if she felt a cold wind only she could feel. A child stared at him in a parking lot and began to cry, whispering, "That man looks wrong." And in the mirror, his eyes stayed wide for just a second longer than they should have. On the final night, William drove back to mile marker 227. He didn't know why, just that it felt like he was supposed to. The moon hung low, bloated and pale. The air was still. He pulled over to the same shoulder, turned off the engine, got out, walked to the ditch, and lay down. The dirt was cool beneath his back. The stars spun slowly overhead. He folded his hands across his chest and stared at the sky, waiting, not afraid, not anymore, just still. And when the headlights of another car crested the bend in the distance, he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, just watched as the tires slowed, as the engine hushed, as someone stepped out and called softly into the dark, "Hey, are you okay?" And William smiled, because it had started again. And now it wasn't him lying in the ditch. Not really. It was something else. Something older than fear, older than asphalt. And now it was looking for someone new. Someone who would stop. Someone who would care. Someone who would make the mistake of looking too closely, of stepping down into the dark.